We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done.
The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone.
Everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody
anywhere
lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
Where no one
wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world
where no child has to die
of diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone
goes to school.
And education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
and be powerful
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is healthy.
We will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets at home,
at school,
and at work.
We will live in a world where
there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We'll live in a world where economies prosper.
and new wealth
leads to decent jobs
for everyone.
And we will live in a world
where our industry,
our infrastructure, and our
best innovations
are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world
where prejudices and extremes of inequality
are defeated
inside our countries
and between different countries.
Where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
Where we replace
what we consume.
Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
Where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
We'll restore
and protect life on land,
the forests,
animals, the earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people
work together
in partnerships of all kinds
to make these goals a reality.
For everyone, everywhere.
These are the United Nations global goals
for sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Let's make it happen.
Un jour se lèvera sur toi branche de lilas qu'un enfant regardera comme un livre d'images. Le monde autour de lui sera vide. C'est ainsi qu'il inventera la vie à you. Good evening, honored guests, judges from the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Mayor of The Hague, and our special guests viewing from the live stream in Vienna, Geneva, and Brussels. And of course, everybody who's watching now all over the world. Bonsoir à nos invités distingués, juges de la Cour pénale internationale et de la Cour internationale de justice, membres du corps diplomatique, maire de La Haye et de Madurodam, et invités spéciaux regardant la division web en continu à Vienne, Genève et Bruxelles. My name is Davine, and I'd like to welcome you to this very special edition of Hague Talks. Tonight, we want to set peace and justice in motion. Mon nom est Davine, et je tiens à vous accueillir à cette édition spéciale des HagueTalks. Ce soir, nous voulons mettre la paix et la justice en action. This evening, here at the stunning Peace Palace, you might find yourself sitting next to a bright student, or an eminent judge, or a seasoned ambassador, or an expert from the field. We are here because we are all experts in our own right. And there is one thing that we all share, and that's the need and the drive, and above all, the courage to make our world a better, safer, and a more peaceful place. In the next 2 hours, you'll hear from 4 thought-provoking young academics, 2 inspiring judges, and 3 bold experts from the field. But before we go any further, I would like to tell you that there are 2 emergency exits on the end of the hall. I feel like a stewardess now. At your right, there is an exit, and on your left, there is an exit, and in the front of you, there's also an exit. Of course, this is good to know for your own safety. But also, please switch off your mobile's ringtone. Thank you very much. And we would love you to share your thoughts and reflections on Twitter, on #HagueTalks. And you can also join us on Facebook, and you can connect with people who commit to making real change happen together. And there is also a Wi-Fi code, and I think it's on the screen in front of you. Is that true? So you can log in for free. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Bernard Bot, chairman of the Carnegie Foundation and owner of the iconic Peace Palace, to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, Bernard Bot.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and the many young faces I see in this beautiful hall, a very warm word of welcome. And I say warm because in some places it's rather cold, so I hope that all of you are fairly warm. A warm word of welcome here in this iconic place, the Peace Palace, and especially in this hall where we have seen many celebrations. In 2013, we celebrated 100 years of the Peace Palace. And so it is fantastic that we can celebrate today 70 years of the United Nations. And I'm very happy that so many people have come here tonight. People from the diplomatic missions, professors, young students, CEOs, business people. I think a fair representation of, let's say, people who really matter, who are really thinking about the global goals, which we will be discussing in a short while. I am the president of the Carnegie Foundation, and I am about as old as the United Nations. So I have seen quite a few things. I have lived through quite a few events, I have seen how the United Nations has developed. And of course, we hear negative things about it. But I think, by and large, it is a fantastic institution. I have had the great pleasure of assisting at quite a few of the General Assemblies, having the occasion to talk to so many people, and each time realizing that if the United Nations wouldn't have been invented, we should do it here, right now. But of course, we do it here in The Hague, and The Hague in itself is an important United Nations city. It houses the International Court of Justice and many other courts, and I think altogether 160 organizations that deal with peace and justice. And that is what we will be talking about also tonight, and what you have been talking about over the past few days, and especially 2 days. Now, I learned that it was the intention to develop visions. But I remember a wise old German chancellor who always said, if you're having visions, you should go and see your doctor. Tonight, I'm sure that the visions you have developed, and which we will discuss in a short while, are visions that really matter and that fit in the United Nations program, in the global goals for sustainable development. Because that is what we are discussing, because we want not only to look back at what has been accomplished over the past, we also want to look forward. That is to say, at least till 2030. How can we implement those global goals? And I understand that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, has exactly issued this message. Yes, we have now established these global goals, now, this month, but what really matters is the implementation. And as you all know, the road not to hell but to heaven, because that is how I consider these global goals, the road to heaven is paved with good intentions. And the good intentions is exactly what you, if I am well informed, have tried to develop. How are we going to implement it? Who are going to implement it? And especially, how are we going to do it together? So I think that it is a wonderful thing that so many of you have today, let's say, listened, talked to each other, and I even heard, although I do not exactly know what it means, that you have heard 88 voices. And again I say, beware, because if you're hearing voices, maybe there's something wrong. And what I want to hear tonight from you is what these voices have told you. What is the result of these voices? Now, there are in particular 4 students who will discuss these items with us tonight. And there will be an interaction with the audience. So don't hesitate to speak up after the 4 students have, let's say, introduced these topics. And the first one who is going to introduce one of these topics is Sarah Shah. She's standing right next to me. I'm very happy that she is willing as the first one of the 4, and that's always the most difficult part. If you have the first one, let's say, to explain things to this huge audience here. But I know that you are very well qualified. We had a very nice discussion before all this started. And I'm very happy to give the microphone to you so that you can tell your story, that you can tell the audience what you have discussed today, what were the voices you have heard, what is the message you're going to convey tonight to this group. And I am sure that because it's such a nice and interesting and mixed audience, that you will have a great success. So thank you very much for being with us tonight, for being the first one, and I'm sure that you will give a brilliant expose. I hand you over the microphone right away, and I even see that they have a timeline here, because they also told me that each of the students may talk 4 minutes, but of course, if it is 5 minutes, and if you are saying very interesting things, I'm sure they give you a few minutes extra. Well, I think that first of all, I would like to hear an applause for Sarah Shah, and then I will give the microphone to you.
Thank you. I've got this, it's okay. Thank you. As a fresh graduate in 2012, I was very excited to find out that I had been accepted for an internship at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons here in The Hague. At the time, I didn't have as much knowledge about the UN as I do today. So I was expecting this high-tech, matrix-like building with screens flashing across the walls. So imagine my surprise when I was shown to my desktop computer to find Windows 1995 and Lotus Notes. And then a few months ago, I was working in the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in Jordan. Safe to say that by now my expectations were significantly less. But I was pleasantly surprised to find Windows Vista. I saw this as a big improvement, but there's still a long way to go. We are all very well aware of the rapid proliferation of technology, and it's very difficult to keep ahead of the game, even on an individual level. But there are many advantages for the UN to keep abreast and provide staff with the most recent technologies so that they can fulfill their roles more efficiently and projects can be completed within a shorter time frame. And of course, there is social media, which needs to be further embraced so that the UN can appeal to a wider audience. And I don't necessarily mean that Ban Ki-moon needs to post duck-face selfies on Instagram. Actually, that might help, but to just utilize all the different platforms available online to create a better global understanding of worldwide issues that affect us all and engage more youth and ordinary citizens. Technology is the future. And we also need to bear in mind that with the many benefits that come with it, there are also many risks involved. War is changing. And ISIS is a perfect example of an army that has used communications technology and social media to further its cause, but also change the lives of impressionable youth all over the world. That too by just a few tweets. It's as if ISIS is this geeky teenage computer whiz kid, and the UN is the grandfather who thinks that Apple is still just a fruit. But states are also in danger, not just from these kind of groups and individuals, but from other states who can gain intelligence and potentially collapse infrastructure. Cyber espionage and cyber attacks need to be seen as potential threats to international peace and security. And the UN Charter needs to overtly reflect this. War is changing. Our information, our identities, behaviors, habits, this is all data that's becoming increasingly valuable, and not just to advertisers and marketers. Think about how this information can affect you were it to fall into the wrong hands. Cyberspace is a whole new battleground, and we do not yet have the basic weaponry to defend ourselves, nor to fight. The UN needs to keep up to date and also create international standards for appropriate behavior in cyberspace. One of the many admirable targets of the 9th Sustainable Development Goal is to provide less developed states with basic information and communications infrastructure. This is all well and good, but we also need to equip these states and give them the knowledge in how to defend themselves were they to ever be the victim of a cyber attack. Otherwise, we're setting them up for failure. Like the World Health Organization, There should be a UN body which promotes international technological safety and security, which sets norms, sets the standards, and provides leadership and technical support. The international community would greatly benefit from this, because like a disease, a cyber attack surpasses borders, does not discriminate between its victims, and blame cannot always be appropriated to a responsible individual or group. The UN really has the potential here to be a world leader in this area and facilitate international cooperation on issues of cyber warfare. As we've seen in the recent tensions between the United States and China, this is much needed. However, the UN cannot do this with Windows 1995. Thank you. And next, I call Matthew Brown.
As an international law student, in a few years' time, the baton will be passed on to me from some of the people, even in this room, to try and solve some of the world's most problematic issues of the day. But as this conflict in Syria and Iraq rages on, I would like to ask one simple question tonight. Do we have time to wait for the baton to be passed on to me, or is now the time to put forward new solutions, which, although controversial, offer a potential solution to overcoming the political deadlock which often gets in the way of progress? Now, at the home of an institution, famed for sometimes its traditional outlook on international law, this might stir some trouble. But the idea of political, independent, private investigatory teams dispatch the conflict zones ahead of formal political approval, I wish to outline, does offer a novel and interesting solution to the political deadlock. To place this idea in some form of concrete example, the Commission for International Justice and Accountability is currently working in both Syria and Iraq, and it demonstrates that investigations can be conducted during a time of conflict, which is an issue that the ICC often struggles with, as its mandate for investigation often falls long after conflict has taken place, where evidence can often be destroyed. Another advantage of the Commission's work is that it is funded by democratic states, but at the same time maintains its independence to investigate both sides to the conflict, crucially, to a standard of beyond reasonable doubt. Whereas UN efforts so far have been the result of political mandates that often include compromise. So with UN efforts, we often see that they are more fact-finding missions. Politically independent, the Commission is able to build solid investigations, which so far have enough evidence to indict both President Bashar al-Assad and 24 members of his regime. Now, admittedly, this idea of roving private investigators does sound a little bit like Scooby-Doo, turning up in their mystery machine to solve the weekly crimes. But just like their fictional comparison, I argue that the Commission is incredibly effective at what it does. Now, as with any idea, this solution isn't without some issues. I fear that states can perhaps contract out their obligations for justice and accountability raises a fair and important point. And likewise, we have to hold the Commission to a high standard of accountability and perhaps take a leap of faith that their investigations will investigate both sides to this conflict. But to end tonight, I want to leave one question with you. Do we resign ourselves to the utter futility of international justice and accept the status quo? Or is it time to entertain ideas which, although controversial and perhaps unorthodox, do offer a new and ingenious solution to the traditional problems of international law? Thank you very much. And in fact, next up will be Diego.
Good evening. It is an absolute pleasure and honor to have the opportunity to be here tonight in such a joyous occasion. 8 years ago, while I was an intern at the United Nations Information Center in Lima, one afternoon my boss, who was the National Information Officer, came to my office and told me that I was invited to a country team meeting. Now, these meetings are the place where all UN heads of agency in a country, they sit down and they talk. I was so excited to have the opportunity to be at that meeting, not only because I had been asking my boss for months to take me, but also, and more importantly, I really wanted to experience and see firsthand leadership and coordination. And because as it was then, and it is now, it was always a goal of mine to have a seat in a table like that on the ground in a UN country team. Now, as the meeting passed, this meeting was in a beautiful UN room in Lima. The meeting was a little less formal than I had anticipated. I was the only person in the room wearing a tie. And of course, my job, the 18-year-old intern, I had to pass the microphone around to make sure that everybody heard each other. That was my job. But as I was moving around all the time, I was trying to absorb everything. I was trying to hear how these decisions are made. And as the time passed, the agenda was tossed aside. The voices grew very loud. And I kept thinking to myself, this is gridlock. This is textbook definition of gridlock. There was no desire to cooperate beyond what was absolutely necessary. Each agency, they had their own territory, their own voice. They were not one. And I kept asking myself, well, how on earth are we ever going to achieve the Millennium Development Goals if we can't even work together? In fact, if we seem that we don't get along. And also, I was in a middle-income country. I was in Peru. How dire must be the UN fragmentation in a country where the UN has, what, 20-plus agencies? And it has the dire, and dare I say solemn, responsibility to feed millions of people every day. Now, the UN has a problem, and we need to discuss it. The fact of the matter is that my expectations, they ran headlong into reality. While the United Nations was created to be one organization, one family, one system, the fact of the matter is that the UN today remains a deeply fragmented organization, and we have to discuss that. Now, the UN is turning 70. That's fantastic, and that's a joyous occasion, and of course we have to celebrate. However, we would not be honoring this great hall, the seat of international justice, and the memory of Dag Hammarskjöld, if we would not also discuss our shortcomings and our challenges. Chief among them, the political blinders of the members, together with the deep bureaucratic entrenchments of the entire UN system. Well, together, they are rendering the UN borderline dysfunctional. Now, how can we change things? How can we make the UN better? Well, that question has been asked and is asked every day, and it's very complex. And the answer, equally complex. We've been discussing all day about this. Now, the answers can be, some of the key principles can be summed up in a few words. Number one, we must eradicate the profound fragmentation between all of their parts of the UN. It is no longer enough to say that we're going to deliver as one. We actually have to do it. It is time to endow national leaders like those in that meeting 8 years ago with sufficient authority to align budgets, avoid duplication of mandates, and actually work to the extent that agencies feel they are part of a whole, and they are not a whole by themselves. Now, Kofi Annan and many other of UN greats like Sergio Vieira de Mello, well, they fought their entire careers, and they used to say, the most important work of the UN is done on the ground. And they fought their entire career to make a change and to have a good impact in peace building and in development. Now, if we are to honor their legacies, look back, but also look forward, well, the UN must finally show sufficient courage to look at itself and ask difficult questions, and have sufficient political courage to make painful decisions for the good of the system, but more importantly, for the good of us, because we are the people. So yes, it is incumbent upon us to make these changes, and we are in the absolute perfect juncture to enact them. The UN just pledged sustainable development by 2030. Now, if we are to achieve these highly multidimensional and ambitious targets on time, on budget, and in somewhat coordinated way, well done. We need to start making changes. And we have to start today. Thank you very much. The next speaker is fellow student Aurea Lerita.
We the people begins with me. I was born and raised in the hotbed of vibrant culture. That is the definition of Kenya these days. Like any other child, I was brought up with a set of principles, and my parents were actually very strict about them. But what I remember most is that fighting with my siblings was inevitable. And whenever we were to report to our parents, the rule was begin with your fault or with your contribution towards the fight, and only then can you say the contribution of the other towards the fight. Little did I know that this life lesson I'll be sharing with all of you right now. We, the people of Kenya, have many things in common. And don't get me started with how much I love that country, because the list will be endless. And apart from the oozing confidence that we have and the pride we have for our country, we have one thing in common, and that is the mindset that being a Kenyan sets you up to be anything and everything. You can be successful and you can survive. We are cultured that even in the difficult moments, there are opportunities. Unfortunately, the difficult moments have been quite many in the past few years. We, the people of Africa, have been through many issues, and we still do have issues. The list is quite endless. But the center of it all has been the inability to keep the peace. Peace in Africa has been honored in the abstract, in our decisions, discussions, and negotiations, but it has been acted upon differently through conflict, terrorism, and all sorts of violence. We, the people of the United Nations, we sit down in our discussions, in our global forums like this one, in our institutions, and in our decision tables. And peace is the main agenda. But yet again, we have failed to look at important players of peace. And who is that? It is me and you, we the people, and that begins with me. We the people of the world indeed honor peace in the abstract, to the extent that it is no longer a part of our daily activities and experiences. Peace has been made a very universal goal, yet it is internally overlooked. They say peace like charity begins at home, right? Then I wonder, is there hope for peace? Is there hope for peace if we, the people of the United Nations, we, the people of the world, do not have a peace of mind? We, the people of the Great Society, have overlooked the importance of our own peace of mind towards world peace. Based on the world definition of problems, we have silenced our own struggles, issues, and things that we need to be addressed. Instead, we take the same burden to the peace-building tables in the hope for what? In the hope for solving world peace. We, the people, should realize that only when we set our peace of mind as the highest goal are we able to have the peace in the world. I want to encourage all of you today to simply reflect on your own peace of mind and think about its contribution to the world peace. It is only when we have the peace of mind will we be able to organize the world peace. Like Wangari Maathai would say, it is the little things that make a difference. For me, my little thing is my peace of mind. What is your little thing? Thank you.
Right. Today, as it was said in the opening statement, we got together in the City of Peace, and we got together to discuss a great deal of things and to come up with outcomes. I have the distinct privilege of presenting and launching on behalf of everybody who participated today in our conversations and in our event celebrating these 70 years of the United Nations. We came up with a manifesto, the Hague Manifesto, that we have launched and we have released today. Now, it is important to know that the manifesto came out of an event in which many people came together from different backgrounds, different levels, different expertise, but with the same passion. And the passion is the Sustainable Development Goals. We have that in common. We may differ in what exactly do we study, how exactly do we go about it. We may even disagree in some of the technicalities. But our passion for the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 16, is something that unites us. And we hope that unites many more. Now, the Hague Manifesto is a document that, if summed up in one word, it's a catalyst. It's just a first step towards a great journey that we hope we make together and with many, many others. It is a document that came out of a student-led initiative in which we discussed issues as cyber governance, peace building, peacekeeping, climate change, among others. difficult topics. And we tried to cluster them, to come up with creative solutions, but more importantly, ideas that are actionable. And that is very important. We didn't want another document among many other documents that I'm sure all of you have read, or maybe not really. But we didn't want that. We wanted something more. So we gathered in 4 workshops, thematic workshops. We discussed papers that were written by myself and bright colleagues of mine. And we tried to turn the principles into actions and have a bedrock of ideas to catalyst and inspire. So, was this document incomplete? Yes, and by design, because we want to create a process whereby everybody participates. And actually, we want more people to say, hey, you missed that, so put it in. And our answer will be, you put it in, come join us. Be part of the process. Join our initiative that started in this beautiful night in the Seat of Justice. Now, we have a certain number of principles. These principles, sorry, I have my little aid here. We basically want to engage with the youth because we are not the future, we are the present. And we want to say and how things are done. We want to engage with all possible stakeholders. I think everybody in this room agrees that we live in a world that is no longer state-centric. And all of us here have a dire wish to ensure that institutions and justice is ensured. So we took SDG 16, the Sustainable Development Goal, that wants to ensure access to justice for everybody and sustainable societies, as our wide-eyed lens through which we wanted to see how can we come up with ideas that are plausible, actionable, and can have a positive impact everywhere. Of course, our lofty ideas in The Hague are only ideas unless we say, well, we have a framework, and we're going to have an action plan that can have an impact from South America to Asia, all across the world. So we are going to follow up. Unlike many of these declarations that I think we just established that not everybody reads properly, we are going to have an action plan, and it's not going to be a one-shot game. We're actually going to follow up. We're going to engage with academics, practitioners, students, and we want to continue the conversation. And we want to inspire many others to join the conversation, because this conversation is global, or at least it should be. And if we are in this beautiful landmark of global justice, then we have to include everybody. And we want to. We want to welcome to this initiative of the Hague Project and many of the stakeholders. We want to include them in this Hague Manifesto, especially the youth, because, as I said, we are the present. And demographically speaking, we deserve a chance to have an impact in decision-making. The Sustainable Development Goals, unlike their predecessors, are a platform much more multidimensional, much more difficult to achieve, because we don't want to ensure just the basis. We did that, sort of. We want to reach for more. And the United Nations has finally set a target in which they want to do that. So this is our Hague Manifesto. Of course, the documents and all of the follow-ups will be put online. Online, we are hoping to have more conversations with everybody, all stakeholders, no matter from where. We hope you read it. We hope you give us feedback. And more importantly, we hope you join the conversation. So this is our manifesto. This is the 88 voices came together and have this. I hope next year somebody else comes here and say, this is the product of 1,000 voices, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
C'est étrange t'aimais tant. Dans un autre temps, moi qui te donnais tout ce que j'avais, sans jamais compter tout ce que j'étais. D'un seul coup, c'est fini. Plus le goût, plus l'envie d'être nous, d'être ici. Moi debout, toi assis. Mon ange, je t'aimais tellement. Il n'y a pas si longtemps, je trouvais normal d'avoir un peu mal, car tu m'aimais bien, c'était mieux que rien. D'un seul coup, c'est fini. T'étais fou, moi aussi. Entre nous, c'est la vie. Jusqu'au bout, j'ai appris. J'aurais tout quitté, tout abandonné pour suivre un ailleurs que je croyais meilleur. T'as rien demandé, j'ai tout inventé. Le rire dans ton cœur, les bulles et les fleurs. D'un seul coup, c'est fini. Plus le goût, plus l'envie d'être nous, d'être ici. Toi debout, moi parti. Étrange, moi qui t'aimais tant. Thank you. This was the first time ever I have performed this song. We just recorded it 2 weeks ago. So for you, this is the very first time that I sing it. Right. We would like to ask you to share your reflections on Goal 16 and the talks of the students. But first, let's listen to a short message, especially recorded for us tonight, of the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Jan Eliasson.
Dear participants, dear friends, it is a great honor for me to convey warm greetings from the UN headquarters as you celebrate the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. You do so in the city of The Hague, the capital of international justice. You gather today in the building of the principal body of the United Nations for International Justice and of an institution devoted to international law. This building is rightly called the Peace Palace. The United Nations is founded on the understanding that the road to peace is through justice, and justice is found in adherence to international law. Peace is never possible through the arbitrary imposition of force. If it is to endure, it has to be achieved through legitimate means, anchored in the recognition of the inherent dignity of all. Indeed, as the UN Charter states, we must work to maintain international peace in conformity with the principles of justice and international law. One of the most notable achievements of the United Nations is the consolidation of international law and of the legitimacy of international judicial mechanisms. The outstanding contribution of the International Court of Justice to peace comes from its pivotal function of resolving differences between states in the application of the law. The International Criminal Court and the UN-supported hybrid criminal tribunals are also important accomplishments of international law. Ensuring accountability for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and other gross violations of human rights that constitute serious crimes under international law is central in the search for peace. I'm very glad also we have now established responsibility to protect, and hope that that norm will soon enter the arena of international law. The principle of the rule of law is the foundation of our common aspiration for a world of freedom and dignity for all. It is also instrumental for achieving the objectives across the three pillars of the work of the United Nations: peace and security, sustainable development, and universal human rights. On this 70th anniversary of the United Nations, and at this iconic venue where you find yourselves today, let us remember and renew our common commitment to a peaceful world anchored in the rule of law. In today's troubled world, we must come back to the purposes and principles laid down in the UN Charter and in the fundamental tenets of international law. In this pursuit, I count on the continued work and commitment by the Hague Justice Portal and the HagueTalks. I wish you a happy celebration.
I'd like to invite Judge Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi of the International Criminal Court to come and share her reflections with us. Judge Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi.
Good evening. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you today. It's an honor to be here to participate in the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. Last time I participated in a similar event, it was the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. And I was a diplomat in New York. It was 1995. And at the time, of course, all heads of states have been invited to the debate to participate in this event. And the biggest challenge was whether the head of states would keep to their 5 minutes. And in particular, Fidel Castro was there. And no one believed that he would keep to 5 minutes, and he did. So that is what the United Nations can do for you. It was a great event, and it was a great time for the UN, 1995. It was a few years after the end of the Cold War. The expectations of what the UN could achieve at the time were huge. Everything seemed possible. It was a new world, a new era. Idealism was at its peak, and expectations of what could be achieved in justice were very high. And it was at the time that the two tribunals were created by the Security Council, the Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, the Tribunal for Rwanda, and all these paved the way to the establishment of the International Criminal Court. And of course, the International Criminal Court is not a UN body, but it was created very much under the auspices of the United Nations. It was negotiated in New York. It was created in New York. And in Rome, when finally the Rome Conference took place, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, played a crucial role to encourage agreements at the last minute when everything seemed to be there, almost failing, and he was really, at the end, supporting the agreement. So the International Criminal Court was really created thanks to the UN, and its operations are very much made possible by the cooperation with the United Nations. Now, I have heard the young scholars giving also, describing some of the challenges of the United Nations, some of the flaws of the United Nations. And many of these flaws are also common to the International Criminal Court. And I heard them talking about outdated technology, fragmentation, dysfunctional bureaucracy, and of course, inability to meet very high expectations in all fields. This is, of course, also common to the International Criminal Court in many ways. But this, of course, all these flaws and challenges, they need to be addressed, and I think we can address them and we can improve, but we should not lose sight of what was achieved in these 70 years for the United Nations, and I would say in these last 12 years of the International Criminal Court. Lots of things were done, huge things were achieved, and as it was said very early today, if the United Nations didn't exist, we should invent it. And if the ICC didn't exist, we should create it. So instead of trying to reinvent or do something different, we should all try to improve what we have, because what we have, I believe, is worth defending. So it is really a pleasure for me to be here tonight, and I do hope that I will be invited in 20 years for the 19th anniversary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi. And now I'd like to invite Judge Julia Sebutinde from the International Court of Justice to take the floor.
Good evening, distinguished guests. I want to start by thanking the organizers for asking me to participate, and also to congratulate them for setting up this beautiful hall in such a beautiful dining place. I never thought it was possible. My role tonight is to speak about Goal 16, and to do so in 5 minutes, which I thought is quite a tall order. I hope that Alexia is ready with the PowerPoint. Great. Last month, world leaders converged in New York to take stock of how much they had achieved under the Millennium Development Goals, set up 15 years ago, as well as to map a way forward for the next 15 years. They adopted the 2030 Agenda for Development, which included the new goals dubbed Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. According to the UN Millennium Development Goals report of 2015, significant strides have been made globally at reducing extreme poverty and hunger, achieving universal primary education, gender equality and women empowerment, enhancing maternal and child health, combating HIV/AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensuring environmental sustainability, and developing a global partnership for development. However, the report also shows that there's a significant disparity in progress and achievement between developed and developing countries. This is because each government was left to set its own national targets, depending on its resources and national circumstances. As a result, many countries were unable to realize the MDGs within the 15-year time frame. Furthermore, the UN family faces new global challenges today, including climate change, global terrorism, international crime, including human trafficking and cybercrime, and of course, conflict. Be that as it may, the value of a unifying agenda underpinned by shared goals and targets cannot be underestimated. The new goals, or SDGs, and the broader sustainability agenda go much farther than the MDGs, addressing the root causes of poverty, and the universal need for development that works for all people. The question and challenge is, however, whether those countries that have lagged behind in working towards the achievement of the MDGs will be able to achieve the even more ambitious SDGs. I've been asked to share some personal thoughts and reflections on what I think needs to be done towards achieving Goal 16. If I could have that goal displayed. Under that goal, countries commit themselves to, and I quote, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions. Interestingly, this is one goal that was not included in the earlier MDGs. 12 targets have been identified under Goal 16, and I was asked briefly to share my own perspectives. In doing so, I came up with 6 words which, like Peace Palace, begin with the letter P. The first of which is people. We, the people, are the most important factor in the global quest for a better world. Accordingly, all efforts geared towards the achievement of this and other global goals should be people-centered. In addition to eradicating poverty, hunger, and disease, we should ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality in a safe and healthy environment. The second P is parity, or equality. We should pursue national and international policies that promote equality at all levels and ensure inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels. Through the enactment and enforcement of non-discriminatory policies and laws, we can eradicate discriminatory culture and practices at all levels. In particular, countries should aim at achieving full gender equality and participation of women at all levels of decision-making. The third P is peace. We should foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies that are free from fear and violence. Countries and governments should identify and tackle the root causes of conflict, such as bad governance, intolerance, and abuse of human rights, and should combat factors that fuel conflict, such as flow of illicit arms and finances. Governments should protect vulnerable groups like women and children from violence, exploitation, displacement, and abuse in all its forms, and should combat organized crime, such as slavery and human trafficking. The fourth P is power. And by power, I mean power through the ballot. We need to build strong, effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels of government, including the legislature, judiciary, executive, local governments, etc. In order to truly empower the people, governments should effect policies that promote transparency and combat corruption in public institutions, and foster a climate that enables the people to hold elected officials accountable. Professional and independent judicial institutions, accompanied by appropriate legal aid schemes, will ensure access to justice for all. The fifth P, policy. Governments need to demonstrate political will through clear policies that promote democracy, rule of law, and the respect for fundamental human rights. The sixth P, partnerships. Regional and international bodies, such as the African Union and the European Union and others, need to strengthen global solidarity by prioritizing peace and security and justice on their agendas. States should put greater emphasis on prevention of conflicts and on the pacific settlement of disputes through mediation, negotiation, arbitration, and judicial settlement. Peacekeeping and peace-building efforts should also be strengthened to prevent repetition of cycles of disaster. International courts and tribunals, too, need to promote efficiency, independence, and transparency, internally and in the way they deal with member states. This will enhance the trust and use of these institutions by member states. These institutions also need to be more representative and inclusive in composition. As you know, the International Court of Justice is the judicial organ of the United Nations, whose main function, as you've heard, is to decide such disputes as are submitted to it in accordance with international law. Its membership is quite representative in that it reflects or mirrors the membership of the Security Council. Gender-wise, however, it's a different story. It's a shame that in 70 years that the court and its predecessor have existed, out of the 106 judges elected to serve on the court, only 4 are women judges, the first of whom joined the court as late as 1995. Since the jurisdiction of the court depends on state consent, more states should consider accepting the compulsory jurisdiction of the court by filing Article 36 declarations with the United Nations. I wanted to also share with you a statistic that I read with interest today from an organization called GEQUAL, that you might have heard of. G, written like a G with a dash in the middle for the word equal. This organization was set up in September in New York to try and promote gender equality amongst international organizations. And they came up with a statistic, or interesting statistics, which revealed that the European Court of Human Rights registers an 8.4% gender parity. That's women as opposed to men. The International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea has only 2.5% women. And the International Court of Justice has only 3.8% women. Now, when I read 3.8 and I considered we were 4 women, I wondered if I was the 0.8 referred to in there. In conclusion, SDG 16 is a goal of primordial importance, but without implementation of set targets, it will remain on paper. Countries will need to put in place detailed action plans and review and accountability mechanisms in order to achieve this and other Millennium Goals. I thank you.
Thank you, Judge Julia Sebutine. And now, we'd like to hear some of your short reflections. So I can imagine you are inspired after hearing all these stories, and maybe you'd like to share your story, your thoughts, your reflections. And so please say your name before you share so we know who you are. So I'd love to invite you. So, who dares? Nobody? Nobody has any thoughts about this? No reflections, no ideas? There we go. Welcome. Is this her? Yeah. I would like to introduce to you Baya Tajib Lee, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Special Envoy for the UN Affairs. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not a minister. I'm one of you all. I must say that I was really, really excited to be here this evening. And I think the major achievement of this evening is to have young people here with so many inspiring ideas. I think, the UN is very special. Why is the UN so special? It has many shortcomings, we all know that. We've seen that, we've all been there. Well, what makes the UN so special is that it attracts the international community to come together to tackle international challenges, global challenges that we cannot tackle on our own. So to think of migration, poverty, terrorism, conflict, climate change, and so on. I think that is a major achievement that we have seen in the last 70 years. The UN is the only legitimate worldwide organization that is able to bring all these countries, all these member states, all these civil society organizations together. Yes, it is not perfect, and that's why we are so happy to have so many young people here with their ideas. Yes, the UN has to become more fit for our times and for the future. And here these ideas are so useful. The youth can help us to make the UN more modern, more effective, and more up-to-date. And I think this goes very well together with wisdom that so many people also have here, especially also this evening. I think wisdom and young, fresh ideas go very well together. A few weeks ago, there was the UN General Assembly, and our King Willem-Alexander, he addressed the UN General Assembly. And he also addressed this very issue. He asked in his speech the following. He said, what would today's world look like without the United Nations? And he said, there can be no doubt we will be worse off. And I think this is also a very good realization. Besides being the only legitimate worldwide organization that brings countries together, we would be worse off if we wouldn't have that. But that doesn't mean that we need to move forward and use these wonderful ideas that the youth present us. Having said all that, I'm very excited to go out later because this beautiful, beautiful Peace Palace, this magnificent Peace Palace, is going to go UN Blue this evening. It's joining a major international campaign where iconic buildings in many of your countries are going to turn blue or perhaps already turn blue because of the time differences. And I hope that we realize buildings can go UN Blue, but let us also remember it is a building, but we should make sure that our hearts and our minds also go UN Blue, and that we keep this inspiration and help promote peace, justice, and development in the world. We need to do this together, and of course we can also do it individually, each in our own way. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bahia Tajibli, for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you. So, anybody else who would like to share their thoughts? If not, then maybe we can go, sir, welcome. She will give you the mic.
It's really because you have sung in French that I will say a few words and participate in your discussion. I'm the French ambassador. Well, I think I fully agree with our colleagues, Dutch colleagues, who just said that it was very inspiring to hear the youth tonight. There are a lot of matter for optimism in the 70 years anniversary of the United Nations. Well, because we have achieved a lot in 70 years, and it has been said during the General Assembly. The second matter for optimism is the adoption of Sustainable Development Goals, and I fully agree with one of the youth specialists who have said that all is a matter of coordination and consistency, and what is in these SDGs are basically that. The thing that you cannot achieve peace without a proper protected environment, you cannot achieve peace without international justice, and everything is interconnected, and we should make all the things that we have decided work together. The third matter of optimism is what is going to happen also at the end of this year with the COP21, the Paris Conference on Climate Change. It will be a real test case for our capacity to meet the expectations of the world, and we are fully confident that the world will mobilize for an ambitious result. Of course, there are also matters of pessimism, and when it has been said by the youth also, what happens in Syria is a disparaging picture of what we cannot achieve as the international community. But at the same time, as the president of the ICC said tonight, it's up to us also to repair the flaws that exist in the system and improve the system. But one of the messages I wanted to deliver is that this system can be improved, and it's not the issue of changing or reinventing something. We have the United Nations, which should make it work. And there are some things that you can do on the basis of what we have achieved already, like, for instance, what we try to do, make it possible for the International Criminal Court to look at the fight against impunity in Syria. We have failed so far, but we still think that it is possible. The other thing that we can do is, for instance, make a commitment as permanent members of Security Council to not use our veto rights when there is cases of mass atrocities in the world. And that would unblock the situations that we face, for instance, in Syria. So basically, we can do a lot of things. It's up to us to be responsible and to make the system that we have created work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We have time for one last question. There.
If you hear this message, wherever you stand, I'm calling every woman, calling every man. We're the generation, we can't afford to wait. Future started yesterday, we're already late.
We've been looking for a song to sing, searched for a melody, searched for someone to lead.
We've been looking for the world to change. If you feel the same, then go on and say, if you're out there, sing along with me. If you're out there, I'm dying to believe that you're out there. Stand up and say it loud. If you're out there, tomorrow's starting now. Now.
generation. We can't afford to wait. The future started yesterday, and we're already late.
Wow, that was amazing. What lovely voices, pitch control, wonderful. Well, we've heard from you, and we've heard from 2 judges, and from 4 students. And now let's hear from 4 people who have been working in the most dangerous conditions for people in conflict areas, women, children, and refugees. First up, we have Esther van der Woert from UNICEF. She has spent more than 10 years coordinating emergency interventions. Esther.
Thanks. Thank you. Bonsoir. Good evening. When I was asked to come and speak here and to speak about peace and justice, I was saying, well, I usually work in conflict areas where there is really not that much peace and justice. But then I started telling stories about what I've done and what I've seen over the past 10 years. And then I realized that these are actually pretty good reflections of reality, and maybe they can give some food for thought for the future. At the start of my master in humanitarian assistance, one of our teachers was asking a co-student why he wanted to do this work. And his answer was, because I want to do good. And at the time, we laughed a little bit about the simplicity of his answer. But in the end, that was what we all wanted. We wanted to do good. And I believe, I dare to believe, and I still believe, that people are genuinely good and want to do good. This is, for me, my goal. When I go out to the field, I contribute, I try to save lives, I try to relieve suffering. And so with these stories, I'm trying to tell you what that has taught me. Recently, I was in Central African Republic, and we had difficulties to deliver aid to the north because about 40 kilometers from the capital, there was constant trouble. There was roadblocks and attacks on humanitarians. So we decided to go and stop there and negotiate safe passage. When we went to talk to the people who were there, we discovered that they were actually asking for attention for their own plight. They were telling us, we always see you passing through, you're bringing medication, you're bringing blankets further up, but people here are suffering as well. So when we agreed with them that we would come and do an assessment, and that if indeed we found that they were in the same type of vulnerability as the people that we were helping at the time, they would be included in the relief program. So then they calmed down, and we could resume our activities. The reasons why I'm telling you this, one of them is that it showed me that you shouldn't ignore or reject your opponents or refuse to talk to them. But going towards them, explaining your objectives, talking to them, trying to understand their objectives, it can make a very big difference on the ground. And yes, sometimes it's scary. It's not always very comfortable to speak to armed people. But then again, if you're trying to deliver aid in an area that is controlled by somebody, how can you do that without actually communicating with these people? That would be imprudent, sometimes dangerous, and could be impossible. What we've also discovered is that while talking to people, we try to explain that what they're doing is also detrimental to their own people. Because in the end, we would stop delivering aid altogether, and then everybody is suffering. So we also try to find a common ground to achieve a win-win situation. I believe that a win-win is essential to achieve a long-lasting understanding. We also try to make from opponents, if not supporters, at least people that are tolerant towards each other, that we are benevolent enough towards each other and towards our objectives, that we can leave each other in peace so that our work can be possible. We had a beautiful example of that in Batangafo, as well in Central African Republic, where there had been very heavy clashes between the Christians and the Muslims. The situation in the city was very tense. So at some point, after the clashes, the imam and the bishop, they got together and they appeared in public together. They walked hand in hand through each other's neighborhoods, and they organized a football match as a sign of reconciliation. And it was a very powerful moment and a very strong message that they were sending out, that yes, they did not have the same religion, but that was not a reason to feel opponent or to be rejecting each other's objectives. And they were encouraging their followers to do the same. We also, I feel in any case, that we have a shared responsibility for the consequences that we have if we cannot do our work. In the end, we would be stopping our delivery of aid altogether, and who's suffering then? Sometimes people see injustice, they see suffering, but they don't do anything about it. They don't feel responsible for it. But how can you expect to live in peace if you yourself are not participating in trying to achieve that? And how do you expect to live in a just society if you yourself are not being just? And yes, of course, this can be within your own means. Maybe the stories that I'm telling you seem far away from you. But I believe that also here, in The Hague, in your own city, in your own environment, your own street, you can be responsible and act in accordance with it. During the cholera epidemic in Haiti, one of my colleagues was trying with all his might to get medication to a cholera center that was completely cut off from the rest of the country due to rain and floods. And in the end, he managed, by convincing the people from the treatment center and villagers from the village next to it, to come towards him and to take boxes of medication and to bring them over their heads and wade through the water back to the treatment center. So when he went to the local medical authority to report on what he had done, he found the doctor completely amazed and in admiration. And he was saying, like, I cannot believe that you managed to do this. And my colleague told me that that was actually the first time that he realized that, yes, on his own, he could make a difference. There is one last thing that I would like to mention. Over the last decade and a half, our work has become increasingly difficult and increasingly dangerous. Humanitarian workers become victims of kidnapping and of attacks. This is not normal. It's not okay. We are impartial, we are neutral, and we are independent. And when we work, we should have a minimum of safety to be able to do our work and not feel threatened or targeted. Why am I still doing this work? You might ask. Yes, it is dangerous, and sometimes it is also tiring. I move myself more or less, on average, every 9 months. I go from place to place. I get to know new people. I lose my friends from the other place. I need to get to know a new city. Now I'm working in The Hague for 4 months. I have no idea where I'll be in February. So yeah, sometimes it is a bit tiring, but why do I do it? Because I want to do good. Please do some with me. Thank you.
Maybe. Thank you, Esther, for sharing that with us. And now we have a video message from the Executive Director of UN Women.
Excellencies, friends, around the world, we are seeing a growing commitment to ending violence against women and girls. Eliminating violence against women is a key target in Goal 5 of our 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And it was the top commitment noted by heads of state at our historic global leaders meeting last month at the UN. Here in The Hague, you will soon host the third World Conference on Women's Shelters. This is an important forum for advancing the issue of responding to violence against women and girls and ensuring that it remains a global priority. The Secretary General's Unites to End Violence Against Women campaign, which UN Women is proud to host, has declared the 25th of each month an Orange Day. The color orange is symbolic of a brighter future, free from violence against women for both women and girls. I commend the Netherlands for showing their support for this initiative by lighting the Peace Palace orange tomorrow. You will be drawing vital attention to the importance of access to services for survivors. Making sure all women and girls have access to quality essential services is vital, especially if we want to stop violence from reoccurring. This is a priority for women, and it must be a priority for all countries. I thank the Global Network of Women's Shelters, the Dutch Women's Shelters, the City of The Hague, and the Peace Palace for making this public demonstration of support possible. I cannot wait to see your results and to support your recommendations.
So now we have Benafsha Ifaf. She's from Women for Afghan Women, a very strong woman and defender of women's rights from Afghanistan. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Benafsha Ifaf.
Thank you and good evening. First of all, let me share with you my first feeling from The Hague when I arrived only 1 week ago. One night I could not sleep. I just looked out of my window. It was quiet. The street lights were shining. And also everywhere was so much bright. I just went out and walked for an hour to experience a feeling of safety, a feeling of not being judged, a feeling of not being harassed. But in my country, Afghanistan, let me tell you, a woman cannot leave her house after 6 o'clock in the evening without the company of a man. Now I am here in The Hague, talking to you at the Peace Palace. But in my country, Afghanistan, the women are not allowed to take part at peace negotiation and talks. Women in Afghanistan are the most vulnerable around the world. If they suffer from, most of them, when they suffer from any kind of violence, they are silent. Even they do not ask for justice. If their husband beating them, they think it's the rights of their husband. A girl cannot question her parents if they deny her the rights of her schooling. These mentalities motivate me to become a lawyer and to defend from those women that they cannot defend themselves. I'm working for a human rights organization called Women for Afghan Women Organization. We are working in a situation that the responsible parties do not take action according to the rules and regulation. Everyone is against us, against our activities. Everyone wants to stop us. But we still continue our activity to protect Afghan women and girls from the violence. Now let me share one of my client story with you. This client's name is Mursal. Mursal was found in a deserted street of Kunduz province. She was brutally raped while she was only 6 years old. This horrific experience caused her a terrible physical injury and a refusal to speak. Now please think, what was the police action when they found this victim? The police did not even identify the girl. They didn't take her to the hospital. They did not investigate about the crime as their tasks and responsibilities. They just handed over this young girl to our organization and left us with the responsibility to take care of. Now think what we do. As I mentioned, that she suffered from a serious physical injury, so she needed medical treatment. So we started to help her with some medication because her condition was so serious. But in this stage, many Afghan doctors refused to treat her. You know why? Because she did not have any family to support her. Even I presented her as my daughter. I told to the doctors that she's my daughter, now please treat her. They told no. You know why? Because they don't want to be a part of a possible trial concerning the rape case. But we're still searching to help her, to medicate her, even if we go and find it in abroad. Now think why I am sharing this with you. Because it is one example of the many. This is an example of how the responsible parties refusing their tasks and responsibilities in Afghanistan. This is an example of violence against women and young girls in Afghanistan. And this is an example of being victim by the system. And also, finally, it's an example of lack of the government support. But what I hope and what I work for a country, there will be a good connection and cooperation between the civil society and the government, where each individual respects the rights of the others, where women and men work together. Then in this situation, I will never say that I am working to decrease violence against women. I will say that I work to stop violence against women completely in Afghanistan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Benafsha. And now we have Michiel Salomons. Machiel spent more than 25 years working in the field, and now he's working in Geneva for UNHCR. Ladies and gentlemen, Machiel Salomons.
Thank you very much. I'm working for UNHCR. According to our statute, we are strictly non-political, pure humanitarian. It is argued that after the Security Council, UNHCR is perhaps the most politicized United Nations agency. We have to work under extreme difficult circumstances, as the situation in Europe today shows. Hardly a day goes by, or we see images on TV, we read articles in the newspapers about the refugees arriving here in the most deplorable conditions. The other day I turned on the TV and I saw in the middle of the night families with children who were screaming up to here in the water, in the ice-cold water, in Europe. And then realize that these same people first had to cross the Mediterranean in rickety boats or even cross a desert under extreme difficult conditions. So far this year, 500,000 asylum seekers have reached Europe. 3,000 of them, at least that's what we estimate, have died. There's a perception here in Europe that we're overwhelmed with refugees. But you probably don't know that 9 out of 10 refugees are living in the south. They're not in Europe. In the countries surrounding Syria, in Turkey, for instance, or in Lebanon or in Jordan, there are 4 million refugees. An equivalent number in Holland would mean 4 million refugees. And yet, Lebanon is coping with it. Now, obviously, there are very, very, very big challenges, and UNHCR is aware of these challenges. But Europe has a very, very important obligation to fulfill. Why? Because ever since UNHCR was established 65 years ago, Europe has always supported us. Not only Europe, but the United States and countless other donors. And whenever a country in the third world was thinking of abandoning asylum, and perhaps they had more reason to do so because they were so poor that they couldn't even feed their own people, it was Europe that stood up and advocated on behalf of the refugees to keep the borders open. And now that Europe is all of a sudden confronted with such a sizable number of refugees, panic breaks out. Europe is divided. On the one hand, we see the most amazing things happening in Sweden and in Germany. We see a consensus building with regards to the relocation of refugees that arrive in Greece and Italy. For the first time in history, 160,000 people are going to be divided all over Europe, which is a magnificent gesture. There are also negotiations currently going on with Turkey. And I must say, when I saw the President of the European Commission almost crying the other day on TV, I thought, this is the best thing that can reflect the feelings in Europe. But there's also a darker side in Europe. Some governments are building fences in order to keep the refugees out. It's nonsensical, because you don't keep refugees out by building fences, because refugees are in dire need of protection, so they find an alternative way to get out. It's only done in order to satisfy domestic political perception. And then, of course, there's the role of the media. The media plays an incredible, important role, because you probably don't realize it, but the overwhelming majority of Europeans really, when they see these terrible pictures of refugees, want to help. Who can forget when this little boy was washed up at the sea in Turkey? This spontaneous outpouring gesture. Tourists who were on holiday started to provide emergency aid to refugees that arrived. People who never thought of refugees decided to offer their rooms and boarding. because they had seen for the first time something tragic like this. And in other places, toys were handed out and candy was handed out. But it is because of negative reporting, and it is because of the politicization of the refugee question, that the whole attitude can change. And unfortunately, this is something that we're now seeing in Europe happening. One has to be very, very careful, in my view, because asylum is sacrosanct. It is something that can only occur in a civilized environment. And UNHCR is working extremely hard, day in, day night, to preserve asylum. But we're not only lobbying, we're not only playing an advocacy role on behalf of the refugees, we're doing much more. Did you realize that in some of the Greek islands, we're with 120 relief workers? I have a friend who worked there on that island, and he said he's doing exactly the same thing in Greece that he did 6 months earlier in Tanzania. But this is Europe. How is it possible that UNHCR, a protection agency, a relief agency, has to help European states in order to cope with an influx of refugees? Through Central Europe, we have deployed hundreds of staff. We are paying NGOs in order to help with keeping refugees alive. How on earth is that possible, and what is required to change that? Well, unfortunately, I do not have the answer to this particular question. The only thing that I can do is, on a night like this, appeal to all of us to keep the borders open for genuine refugees. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Michiel Salomons. And now I'd like to announce to you that Merlijn, excuse me, because I have to look for his name, Merlijn Twaalfhoven and Amer Shanati will do something really special for you. So here they are.
حسين يوسف ترعاني فلسطيني سوري كنت عايش بدرعا هلا انا صار لي شيء 4 سنين بلبنان عايش بمخيم برج البراجنة. انا حبيت الراب عشان الاستاذ اسمه استاذ هاني حبيته كثير فعشان هيك حبيت الراب. والغنية غنيتها عشان اشي اللي عم بحكيه اشي واقع اشي صاير يعني كل يوم عم نشوفه على التلفزيون بالحقيقة كمان. خلصت شو بدي احكي؟ كنت قاعد مرتاح ما فيني أي شي، بحب الناس والناس بتحبني، بحياتي ما كرهت حدا ولا حدا كرهني. فجأة صار راسي عم بيوجعني من كتر التفكير، إيه صرت تخيل حالي مثل أي مدينة فيها له تدمير والحقد والانتقام بخيالي عم بصير. فقمت شربت حبة وجع راس، بلكي هالوجع بطير، جسمي كله ارتاخى، ما عاد بدي أتحرك من كتر ما أنا مبسوط، لأن الحروب يلي براسي كلها طارت ونفسي ارتاحت، وكل الأوجاع يلي كانت فيني راحت. بعد أقل من الثواني المي اللي شربتها لما وصلت على المعدة تحولت لبنزين وبلشت تحرق الناس المساكين. كيف تحرقون في اسم الدين؟ يا لكم من كافرين. الإيمان ليس مجرد طاقية أو داء المرخية، لكنه في داخل القلب من أيام سيدنا آدم أبو البشرية. جسمي بلشت تتصارع وهون بلشت تصير الانشقاقات، وهون بلشت تصير الانشقاقات. أعضاء جسمي تحولت لكتائب، مصاريني بلشت تتقطع وصرت أسمع صوت الناس يلي عم بتخانقوا جوا جسمي. حسيت حالي تحولت لكرة أرضية وعم بتصير جوات أعضائي حروب العالمية بين المسلمين والكفار، بين اليهود والأنصار، بين الصليب والفجار. جسمي ارتخى بلشت أوعى على الأرض شوي شوي، حسيت بإيدي اليمين شلت ما عاد قادر أحركها، طلعت عليها لقيت الدود عم بياكلها، فجلست راسي فسمعت صوت عالي جوات راسي عم بيحكي لي موت. سمعت صوت عالي جوات راسي عم بيحكي لي موت. لقيتني ضامنين مع ايدي الجريح وقلبي الحزين. إذا ما توحدنا كنا ايد واحدة قوية رح نشل اكتر وتنتهي القضية. إذا ما توحدنا كنا ايد واحدة قوية رح نشل اكتر وتنتهي القضية. إذا ما توحدنا كنا ايد واحدة قوية رح نشل اكتر وتنتهي القضية.
Thank you, Amer Shanati and Merlijn Twaalfhoven. May I ask the Mayor of The Hague, Josias van Aartsen, to say a few words?
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this was, I think, a great evening. The interesting thing was, I think, the Hague Manifesto. Thanks to all who have contributed to make this manifesto. It's great for the UN, and of course, it's important for the city of The Hague, city of peace and justice, with this beautiful palace here in our midst. The interesting thing was the enthusiasm, and that's what I think the United Nations need for the future. The younger generation, inspiration from the younger generation, and change. One of you said, I think it was you, who mentioned the importance of, well, change in the United Nations system. There was one very important functionary of the United Nations I never forget, Fiera de Mello. He was mentioned by you this evening. He was an inspirational leader for the United Nations. He was practical. He realized a lot for the world and for the United Nations. And let the spirit of Fiera de Mello come over the United Nations again, would be my advice. And this evening, I felt that spirit here. Keep on going. Please do, because it's up to you, the younger generation, to change the United Nations. It's important for the world. Thank you for the inspirational thoughts you dealt with us. Esther van der Woerd, Michiel Salomons, he said some things quite important for the European Union. Well, there is a great philosopher from The Hague, Baruch de Spinoza, who wrote a lot about freedom and about mankind and the importance of freedom from fear, one of the pillars of Roosevelt during his famous speech in '44. Well, freedom of fear is important for the whole world and for the whole mankind. And I think it's up to United Nations to do something about it in, well, the next years with the help of the younger generation. That's the reason why I want to invite Noah van Meekeren, the mayor. We have two mayors here in the city of The Hague. Noah van Meekeren and of course Bahia Tazipli. Well, let's turn the world blue and let's start to bathe the Peace Palace in blue. And we can do that here with this beautiful instrument. Shall we? Okay, all the three of us. Yeah? Yes. There we are. You can only see from the outside.
Thank you, Mr. Mayors, and thank you, Bahia Tajibli. They just turned this beautiful Peace Palace blue, and you can kind of see it through the windows. It's really blue. Amazing. Well, that brings us to the end of the part of this evening. I'd like to thank Hague Project Peace and Justice for organizing this very special edition of Hague Talks. And many, many thanks to our great speakers, the Peace Palace, and all our fantastic volunteers. Alors, merci au maire de La Haye, au maire de Madurodam, et merci Bahia Tajibli. Eh bien, cela nous mène à la fin de cette partie de la soirée. Je tiens à remercier The Hague Project Peace and Justice pour l'organisation de cette édition très spéciale de Hague Talks. Un grand merci à nos excellents orateurs, au Palais de la Paix et à tous nos bénévoles sans qui nous n'y serions pas arrivés. Merci beaucoup. Well, if you'd like to continue celebrating the future with us, we would like to invite you to come with us to Humanity House. And the good news is transport is arranged and waiting outside for you. So we would love to see you there so we can change some thoughts and, well, kind of enjoy the evening together. In the meantime, let's keep working on peace and justice together. And now we have time for one more song before you leave.
Quand il me prend dans ses bras, il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose. Il me dit des mots d'amour, des mots de tous les jours, et ça me fait quelque chose. Il est entré dans mon cœur une part de bonheur dont je connais la cause. C'est lui pour moi, moi pour lui dans la vie. Il me l'a dit, l'a juré pour la vie. Et dès que je l'aperçois, alors je sens en moi mon cœur qui bat. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Il est entré dans mon cœur une part de bonheur dont je connais la cause. C'est lui pour moi, moi pour lui dans la vie. Il me l'a dit, l'a juré pour la vie. Et dès que je l'aperçois, alors je sens en moi mon cœur qui bat.
Amazing. Pitch control, their lovely voices. I guess now the evening has really come to an end. And I would like to thank everybody for being here tonight and for sharing their thoughts and their reflections. And I hope that everybody had a really special night tonight that they will always remember here in the beautiful blue Peace Palace. It should have been La Vie en Bleu. Mais I guess that Edith Piaf wouldn't agree on that. So thank you once again, and I hope to see you again someday somewhere. Merci.